Hey, one of our sponsors on today's program has made a truly positive impact on someone that my son thinks is the most important person in the world. And of course, I am not talking about yours truly. My son basically sees me as a chair. I'm talking about our cat. Why you got to try Smalls. It is time to make kibble a thing of the past. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you'd find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why veterinarians.org rates Smalls 10 out of 10 for ingredient quality. Smalls was started back in 2017 by a couple of guys who were home cooking cat food in small batches for their friends. Few years later, they've served millions of meals to cats across the U.S. As I mentioned, I guess it was a month or two ago now, one of my cats passed away. And frankly, the other cat has been depressed, and we've had some challenges in getting him to eat. And one of the ways that we now entice him is through the various Smalls cat foods. They got fish, they got chicken, they got liver, and they also have like a pouch of like fish sauce or something that when we mix it in with some of his kidney food, he eats it all up. It's been great because we were worried about him in terms of like not eating. And meanwhile, at this point, you're probably wondering, why can't I just feed my cat kibble? Well, believe it or not, your kitty descended from ferocious desert cats who hunted live prey for food, and your cat isn't any different. They still need fresh, protein-packed meals to be at their best. Other cat food brands know this, but they choose to put their wallets first. They fill their food with mysterious meat byproducts, artificial flavoring, and preservatives with names that I couldn't in a million years pronounce. If that sounds gross, imagine having to eat it every day. So after making the switch to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported overall health improvements, and that's a big deal. Team at Smalls is so confident your cat's going to love their product that you can try it risk-free. That means they'll refund you if your cat won't eat their food. Now's the time to make the switch to Smalls. Head to smalls.com/majority. Use the promo code majority at checkout. You will save 50% off your first order plus free shipping. That's the best offer you're going to find, but you have to use my code majority for 50% off, 50, on your first order. One last time, that's promo code majority, 50% off your first order plus free shipping at Smalls, SMALLS.com/majority. All right, now time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Sharon Lerner, writer covering health and the environment for ProPublica, on the Trump administration's quashing of EPA scientists' warnings about dangerous chemicals. Then Ari Berman, national voting rights correspondent at Mother Jones, author of Minority Rule, the right-wing attack on the will of the people, and the fight to resist it, on the Republicans' last-minute attempts to screw with the vote. Meanwhile, Israeli warplanes hit Lebanon as Hezbollah attempts a missile shot in central Israel. In a new ProPublica report, contrary to Secretary Blinken's public assertions, he rejected two of the U.S. government agencies' report that Israel was deliberately trying to starve Gaza. Reuters Ipsos poll has Harris up 47 to 40%. CNN has her up 48 to 47%. Meanwhile, Senate Dems look to Florida and Texas races to maintain their Senate majority. Marcellus Williams executed by Missouri. This after the U.S. Supreme Court denies a stay on a surprise 6-3 vote. This despite the prosecution in Missouri in favor of a stay. A Haitian nonprofit files criminal charges versus Donald Trump and J.D. Vance for making up this story about cats and dogs and wreaking havoc on the Haitian community in Springfield. Meanwhile, Florida bans instruction on contraception, consent, domestic violence, and LGBTQ issues in their sex ed classes. New York City school chancellor, the latest Eric Adams-aligned appointee, to resign because of federal criminal investigation. Alex Jones's InfoWars to be auctioned off in 6 weeks. Just enough time for you guys to subsidize my purchasing his entire outfit. Lastly, FBI report shows violent crime down, but hate crimes against the LGBTQ community up. Almost the inverse of what we've heard from some right-wingers in terms of what they've been harping on. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Emma out today. Bradley out today. Matt and I flying, well, I guess not technically solo, but
I was going to pretend like I also wasn't here so that people could imagine how you were doing this.
Yes, that would be shocking. There'd be a lot of me going
squiddly diddly.
Yep. The phone would be moving around. It is Hump Day. People are asking about that Florida story. I mean, this is what's old is new again, or I should say, yeah. In terms of this like abstinence only programs, or more or less abstinence only programs that we're seeing by right wingers in the States. We will try and get to that. And we'll also talk about this report from the FBI. Time and time again, we've heard right-wingers and even some centrist commentators say, crime is up. We've got to panic about crime. Meanwhile, crime is dropping. COVID had a spike in crime. Those same people very often are harping about how dangerous it is for our society to have people whose gender doesn't idea of gender does not conform to theirs. And the results are obvious. Crime being down is not a function of people pretending that crime is up, but their attacks on LGBTQ people certainly lead to greater hate crimes. So overall, violent crimes are down. Hate crimes are up in that context, though. We'll talk more about that later. In the meantime, we're going to be talking to Sharon Lerner about a report from ProPublica, but there was another big report from ProPublica that broke yesterday. Here is a tweet from back in July of 2023 by Secretary Blinken regarding Russia's refusal to essentially stop blocking the Black Sea grain initiative. At one point, they had basically closed off the port and were preventing the export of millions of tons of grain. And keep that up. And Secretary Blinken writes, Russia's refusal to extend the Black Sea Grain Initiative harms millions of hungry people around the world. Using food as a weapon is unconscionable. We urge Russia to reverse course. Now, of course, the United States really had no ability to force Russia to do this, because they don't have any type of leverage. And they have no statutory obligation to say, stop selling arms to or providing aid to Russia, because we're not providing that aid to Russia. However, we do provide that type of aid to Israel. And ProPublica's Brett Murphy apparently got a hand, and ProPublica apparently got their hands on emails, internal emails within the State Department. You recall back in May, Anthony Blinken appeared in front of Congress and said, we do not, this is May 10th, we do not currently assess that the Israeli government is prohibiting or otherwise restricting the transport or delivery of U.S. humanitarian assistance. Now, this is important because there are two laws on the books, the U.S. Books, that in the event humanitarian aid by the U.S., from the U.S., is somehow prevented from reaching its final destination, sanctions can take place. One of them is the Foreign Assistance Act. Now, this is distinct from the Leahy Law, which says that if there are units of the military that are engaging in war crimes or against international human rights, you can stop providing them weaponry. These are different laws. One, like I say, is the Foreign Assistance Act, which actually the Leahy Law is an amendment to. The humanitarian aid portion of the law is known as 6201, which dates back to Turkey's embargo of Armenia during the 90s. That part of the law has never been widely implemented, but some Democrats in Congress called for Biden to use 6201 to pressure Israelis to allow aid freely into Gaza. In other words, they can leverage aid to Israel if they inhibit the passage of that aid. The Biden administration announced a policy called the National Security Memorandum to require the State Department to vet Israel's assurances about whether it was blocking aid and then report its findings to lawmakers. Meanwhile, during this time, the U.S. Agency for International Development and the State Department's Refugee Bureau concluded that, in fact, Israel had broken that law, saying that U.S. aid sent Blinken a 17-page memo on Israel's conduct. The memo described instances of Israeli interference with aid efforts, including killing aid workers, razing agricultural structures, bombing ambulances and hospitals, sitting on supply depots, and routinely turning away trucks full of food and medicine. Separately, the head of the State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration also determined that Israel was blocking humanitarian aid and that the Foreign Assistance Act should be triggered to freeze almost $830 million in taxpayer dollars earmarked for weapons and bombs to Israel. This is according to internal emails. The UN has declared a famine in parts of Gaza at this point. The world-leading independent panel of aid experts found that nearly half the Palestinians in the enclave are struggling with hunger. Many go days without eating. This all from ProPublica's Brett Murphy's report. Last night, John Kirby, National Security Communications advisor, was on with Chris Hayes, and you can tell that he knows this question is coming and really never answers it.
U.S. leverage over Sinwar and Hamas and Hezbollah is essentially nil. I mean, we can try diplomatic partnerships, but we don't have direct leverage of them.
Not with Hamas, no. It's a terrorist organization.
the Israeli government, we do have leverage. Obviously, we're the largest funder of their military. They have a special program to purchase of U.S. weapons in a streamlined fashion, $16 billion a year. We have a conventional arms transfer policy promulgated by the Biden administration in 2023, and the Leahy law that guides the lawful transfer of weapons to countries that are in line with international humanitarian law. And I want to read you from a ProPublica report today that the U.S. government's two foremost authorities on humanitarian assistance concluded this spring that Israel had deliberately blocked deliveries of food and medicine in Gaza, that their conclusion was explosive because U.S. law requires the government to cut off weapons shipments to countries that prevent delivery of U.S.-backed humanitarian aid. This is USAID, is one of those agencies and an agency inside the State Department. Days later, Secretary of State Blinken delivered a carefully worded statement to Congress that said, "We do not currently assess that the Israeli government is prohibiting or otherwise restricting the transport or delivery of U.S. humanitarian assistance." Did the Secretary of State override USAID's assessment?
I can't speak to the details of the ProPublica report. I saw it this afternoon, same as you, but I can't speak to the veracity of it. What I can speak to is a couple of things. Number one, we take...
Pause it. I mean, we can hear the rest of his garbage response because it's meaningless. But the idea that he doesn't know anything about that report is just absolutely bunk.
What about
no
the
doubt
direct
in my
question?
mind, ProPublica asked for State Department for a comment on this reporting. In fact, I would guess the reason why he's sitting there is because he knows this report is out. And I mean, we know that Blinken has already said that he wouldn't serve in a Harris administration, which it seems to me gives him plenty of time to sit in the court and talk about why he was not following the law. The idea that there is any entities in the U.S. government that have the ability to override the experts who are tasked specifically with the deliverance and the monitoring of U.S. humanitarian aid is absurd. It's a joke. And this is simply, I mean, this is like, this is more or less like it's not terribly different from Iran-Contra in terms of like what we're seeing. The administration completely hiding the truth in the assessment of their own government agencies. When Samantha Power's agency is on the right side of things, you got a problem. We can listen to the rest of what Kirby says, but it's irrelevant. I mean, it's all just filibustering. Let's just listen for a minute. But I honestly, we heard everything he wants to say. I can't address that. And guess what? They're not going to address it. And you probably won't hear any other mainstream news outlet cover it beyond Hayes bringing it up, frankly.
Our obligations under international humanitarian law very seriously. We take the Leahy law very seriously. And we obviously know that a linchpin of any democracy that's at war is to be at war and in keeping with the laws of war. And that you are treating innocent life as seriously as possible and being as careful as you can. And we have made that case to the Israelis time and time and time again since the 7th of October. I'm not going to sit here and say that they haven't caused too many civilian casualties.
And there's thousands and thousands of dead children.
Absolutely have. And each death is tragic. And each one matters a lot to President Biden, and we have continued to press that case. The second thing I would say, keeping in keeping with Secretary Blinken,
I don't understand how you can say we've been having to tell these people over and over again for a year. Like, how do you look yourself in the mirror, say those words, and know that you're actually, you're not really telling them anything? After the first half a dozen times they don't listen to you, even if you are sincere in this request and demand, and they're not doing it, I've got news for you. They're not doing it.
Yeah, that's why Hayes started that line of question off with, where do we have leverage? Oh, yeah, here is some leverage.
I honestly don't even care about hearing anymore. I mean, this is just, it's gross. This is going to take 10 years off of Kirby's life. I would imagine. And I think if there was any type of like semblance of justice, it would. And something like that, to be sitting there lying so flagrantly, has got to eat away at your soul, I would think. He should resign, like the rest of them. All right. In a moment, I'm going to be talking to Sharon Lerner. She's also a writer from ProPublica. I interviewed her about her 10-part series about a couple of years ago about what was going on at the EPA. And there's been a big ruling in what happened during the Trump years with the EPA. We're going to talk to her about that in a moment. In the meantime, I don't know if you're like Matt and you love footnotes. Matt loves footnotes.
Yep, all of the ones in Infinite Jest.
Some people don't. That's okay, of course. But if you're into footnotes, if you're really into footnotes, GiveWell is an independent resource for highly rigorous, scrupulously honest charity research. They have pored over academic studies to help donors direct their funds to evidence-backed organizations that are saving and improving lives. In the process, they've collectively added thousands of footnotes and caveats to their reports. This is what's amazing about this outfit. They have spent 17 years researching charitable organizations. They only direct funding to a few of the highest impact opportunities they've found. GiveWell has had over 100,000 donors who have used GiveWell to donate to more than $2 billion. Rigorous evidence suggests these donations will save over 200,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. GiveWell wants as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about their high-impact giving. You can find all their research and recommendations on their site for free. You can then make tax-deductible donations to their recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell does not take a cut. This is an amazing resource if you want your charitable dollars to have the highest impact. And what's also amazing about this, they have an entire vertical of all the mistakes they've made over the course of those 17 years. Some of them are, very, very like piddling and pedantic, but they list every single one. They didn't provide enough research for this, or they had left out this number or something like that. It really is amazing. Here are some examples of what donations to GiveWell's recommended charities can achieve. Distribution of vitamin A supplements cost about $2 to deliver a vitamin A supplement to a child. Vitamin A deficiency can increase mortality rates. Vitamin A distributions can save a life by reducing vitamin A deficiency. Cash incentives for routine childhood vaccines cost about $155 to vaccinate an infant. This funding provides cash transfers to incentivize caregivers to bring babies to clinics for routine childhood vaccinations, which prevent disease and reduce child mortality. And then, of course, there's the knock-on impact of them having $155, which they can figure out the best way to spend. Go to givewell.org, find out more, or to make a donation, select podcast, enter Majority Report with Sam Seder at checkout to make sure they know you heard about them from us. Again, that's givewell.org to donate or find out more. I have done a lot of giving through GiveWell over the years. Found a lot of charities that I still support, ones that they've rotated through, frankly. Meanwhile, I think everybody has a different idea of what constitutes success with a business. Very often, the things that make our job easier here are the B2B businesses that allow us to have like turnkey solutions. And in this instance, for us on the merch side, nobody does selling better than Shopify. It is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet and the not so secret Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning there's way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Shopify has made our merch store super easy for us to operate. We're going to be able to integrate selling stuff at our live show with what's on the website and knowing our inventory, et cetera, et cetera. Super easy. We got the Vergonia shirts up there. Took us a while to get the design adjudicated, but once we did, we popped it up there, no problem. We sold a bunch of those. Right now, you can upgrade your business and get the same checkout brands like Aloe, Allbirds, and Skims use. Sign up for your Majority Report, Majority Report Radio, I should say. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/majority, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/majority to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/majority. All right, quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Sharon Lerner, writer covering health and the environment for ProPublica, on this story of EPA scientists who are essentially intimidated and were basically attacked by folks in the Trump administration. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland is out today. Joining us now, Sharon Lerner, writer covering health and the environment for ProPublica. Sharon, welcome back to the program. You and I definitely talked about it, I think, multiple times over the course of your year-long 10-part series on what was going on in the EPA. The series launched, I think it was in mid-2022. But it was what had happened at the EPA during the Trump administration. Remind us of what you had reported over the course of that year.
Yeah. So I reported on a group of whistleblowers. These were scientists who worked at the EPA as assessors of new chemicals. They were in this division called the New Chemicals Division. And what they do is They look at chemicals that are submitted by companies that want to introduce them to the market. And their job is to figure out how these chemicals affect human health and the environment. And if they see red flags, major problems, they're supposed to identify them and then ask the companies, figure out ways so that the public won't be exposed. So they have to mitigate the risks that they find. And what these whistleblowers had told me was that they were under intense pressure not to identify problems. And when they did find problems, hazards that the chemicals posed, they were being pressured to remove them from documents, or lessen them, downplay them. Sometimes actually their bosses removed the evidence of hazards from their reports. And so, as you said, this turned into a 10-part series that went into incredible detail about the different kinds of chemicals and different kinds of problems they were facing and identifying.
What can you explain to us the structure of an agency like this? I mean, there has been, EPA, FDA. I mean, there are other agencies that, OSHA, I guess, and agencies that are out there that are trying to protect citizens in various ways, right? I mean, some from the unhealthy environment, some from poisonous drugs or food that is tainted, food inspections. Can you where is the line between who are the types of people? You have scientists who are there, who can be working there for 15, 20, 25 years, I guess, 5. And then you have management and administrators and political appointees. Can you give us a sense of the almost the taxonomy and the sort of the types of people or what their incentive structure would be at any given time?
Okay, so we're talking about the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. The mission of the agency is to protect human health and the environment. And within that agency, there's a division of toxics, and within that, they have existing chemicals and new chemicals. So we're talking about within the new chemicals. The people who reached out to me and blew the whistle were scientists who have worked there, some for only a few years, some for longer. And the managers who were interfering with their work were not political appointees. These were people, career scientists and careers EPA staff members. And I should say that the problems that I specifically wrote about in that series began under the Trump administration. They were not entirely resolved at the end of that administration. And I know that they would all say that they're not entirely resolved right now. So these are problems that did have their roots in the Trump administration when the pressure from industry really reached a peak. And when I say industry here, I mean companies that are submitting their chemicals to the EPA that want them to be able to hit the market as soon as possible. And sort of the timing of this has been a real issue in this part of the EPA. Basically, the companies want them to be able to go to market as soon as possible so they can make money off them. That's what they do. But what happens is that the assessors need time to actually look at the chemicals. Often they come with no information about them. There's no science provided by the companies because the law doesn't require it. So these health assessors are digging up information on similar chemicals based on their structure and trying to figure out how they affect the human body and trying to compare them. And so it's a complicated process that takes time. So that time became sort of an issue in this.
So, okay, but the Corporation X wants their new chemical to be released. They're going to use it for, I don't know, it's some business application in manufacturing, whatever it is. And these scientists are saying, I need more time to look at this stuff. Their manager comes over and goes, what's going on here? Why is it taking so long? What leverage does the corporation have with this manager? Like, does the corporation go to the manager and say, "Hey, man," and the manager, it seems to me, go, does it make the manager's life any worse to say, "We'll get back to you"?
Well, in fact, the companies do in fact approach the folks who work at EPA and are in frequent communication with them. And then also sometimes the pressure comes from lawmakers where a company might reach out to their member of Congress, their representative, and say the EPA is, dragging its feet and we want to bring our product to market, And so I write about that in the series, the different ways that the pressure is exerted on these folks. I mean, they had what they call the hair on fire situations, which is when some important, powerful person is leaning on the agency and saying, get this done. And so the managers are very much feeling this pressure from outside and then sort of passing it on to the people who are doing the work and saying, finish this, get it done. Okay, and the simplest way to get it done is to say there aren't any problems, next.
Okay, so we have, and I understand like lawmakers will respond. I mean, if I've got Pfizer in my district or in my state and they're, saying we hire this many people, we donate this amount of money, we want this drug, and a lawmaker calls and says, but you better get this going because I'm going to make you file all sorts of type of reports and justify your budget. Does that come also from the political appointees within the administration?
Yeah. And just to be clear, we're not talking about pharmaceutical drugs, right?
Right. I'm just using that as an example, although I'm sure that happens with the FDA, but go ahead.
Right. Yes. So are we saying, does it come from the elected members of Congress? Yes.
And what about within the administration? I imagine there are political appointees who also have these relationships with whatever the chemical company is, and they do the same thing as the electeds.
Yeah, I wasn't hearing honestly about that so much. I was hearing more about it coming through the career scientists and staff members.
So you don't know what inspires them to do it.
Well, I think in some cases we do. I think we know that sometimes they meet with in one of the cases I wrote about, one of the scientists was being pressured to change a report. He did not want to change a report. And so a meeting was scheduled and he was not invited with a representative of the company that made the chemical, and the report he had written was changed. And so we know that it was the company that made the chemical,
Well, it was the company that made the chemical, but the report's not changed necessarily by the company. The report's changed by the administrator, and I'm just curious.
Right, not the administrator of the EPA, but
no, like the middle management, I guess. I'm just curious as to like what leverage does the company have with middle management at EPA?
Well, so the pressure, it does come from above them, right? It comes from their bosses for sure. And this is a political issue. Like if you look at Project 2025, they, of course, the Heritage Foundation's guide for the next Republican president. And, they have a chapter on the EPA. And one of the things that they call for is for the speeding up of the approval of new chemicals. So this is kind of an issue that's been identified as, a sort of, red tape slowing down business, by from outside the agency, right?
Yeah. And I guess I'm just curious as to like how that, I understand how they can put pressure on the scientists, because your piece outlines it now that we have the Inspector General has basically validated the claims of 3 of these whistleblowers that they were unjustly reassigned or that they were, they were harassed, et cetera, et cetera. And I get it when a congressperson calls, some middle management person at the EPA and says, your boss is going to be pissed at you because I'm going to make your boss come in front of my committee and justify X, Y, and Z, and you're going to be in trouble for this. But I am curious as to, like, are there other routes in which these corporations follow, i.e., through the administration? Because it started during the Trump years, but I mean, presumably, corporations always want their chemicals to be quickly approved, and that they always want less red tape. So, like, why did it start during the Trump years as opposed to, let's say,
it increased. I think it was the particular issues that I was writing about came up during the Trump administration. But as I said, they continued beyond it. And the pressure, yes, does come from elected officials, but also directly from companies that contact the EPA for sure.
But what is their leverage? It's just like they're going to go, like, if you don't do what we say, we're going to go talk to, elected or something like this.
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
And so where are we now with this? Like, what is there improvement? Like, what does the administration do when they come in, a new administration, that would change this dynamic?
What could a new administration do?
What could or do? Yeah.
Or did. Well, so after some of my pieces ran, the Biden administration said that they were making improvements to the Division of New Chemicals, and they set up some new panels that are supposed to, pay attention to scientific integrity. And after the Inspector General's report came out, I think it was last week, they said that they would be updating their whistleblower training for all the staff. And I should say, you mentioned that, the Inspector General's report validated their claims. It did validate their claims of retaliation, but there are more reports that are expected that will deal with the substantive claims, because they actually put out a huge amount of material to the IG and to me that showed, it was not just about retaliation, it was about the very specific changes they were being asked to, and in some instances required to make. And it's about, chemicals that were sometimes approved. So there's a lot of substantive material that the IG has not dealt with yet.
Why does the IG sequence it in that way?
I have no idea. And why did it take more than 3 years for this, from the first report, was it 3 years? Quite a long time.
2 years, I think, from 22. Well, at least from, probably close to 3.
But anyway. A very long time. And I don't know that when we'll see the reports on the substantive issues.
Lastly, hard to imagine that these middle management people are retaliating against these scientists if the scientists' substantive issues weren't legitimate in the first place, right?
Of course, yes.
I mean, we got to wait for that IG report, but I don't think we're going too far out on a limb to say that, substantively speaking, there were problems with these chemicals, and right. The EPA, at least in the middle management, was ignoring them because they weren't, I guess, essentially getting the proper protection from outside influence.
Yeah, I mean, they were cracking down on these scientists who were trying to do their job, which is to protect the public from the harms of chemicals. And when they said, we think these are harmful, which they didn't have any ulterior motivation for saying that, they faced retribution.
Sharon Lerner, writer at ProPublica, covering health and the environment. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Ari Berman will be here. He's national voting rights correspondent at Mother Jones, author of Minority Rule, The Right-Wing Attack on the Will of the People and the Fight to Resist It, on the various attempts by Republicans and supposed former Democrats to essentially screw with the vote this fall. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. It is always a pleasure to welcome back to the program. Ari Berman is the national voting rights correspondent for Mother Jones Magazine, author of 2 books, if I'm not mistaken. The most recent three. Apologies.
You always miss one of my books.
There's always one I miss. But the most recent, Minority Rule, the right-wing attack on the will of the people and the fight to resist it. Your first one was actually a campaign book, right?
Herding donkeys. Yeah, I just don't like it that much. So I just don't.
That's why I don't talk about it either. I sense that. Yeah. Ari, great to see you. I've talked a little bit about these stories peripherally, and it's hard to know how much impact they're going to have. But the context in which we're discussing these things are that Donald Trump won the 2016 election with 70,000 votes over the course of 3 states. I think Biden won with a margin of even less than that over the course of like 4 states. So when we're talking about 5,000 votes, 10,000 votes, 15, 20,000 votes, that's a big deal, even though we're talking about states with millions of votes. And so any tiny change to the voting processes can really have a big, big impact. And you've obviously been writing about this. If you were to put like a little siren on top, which state right now would get that siren?
Well, I've been doing a lot of sirens on Georgia recently because that is the state where the Trump campaign seems the most dead set on trying to rig the election ahead of time. They're basically rerunning the 2020 playbook, but now they're doing it before the election. And I think the state where they're doing it the most clearly is Georgia, because they are changing how elections are run and potentially how elections are certified there through the state election board, which now has 3 Trump MAGA election denier appointees as a controlling majority. And so they are passing the greatest number of rule changes that could lead to disputes over how votes are counted, that could lead to election officials not certifying the results. And they're also doing it at the 11th hour when it could cause the greatest amount of impact and confusion.
And I mean, Georgia seems like almost like the least likely because of the hostility between Kemp and Trump and was it Raffensperger? Raffensperger. Yeah. I mean, Georgia's the place where they recorded Trump saying, like, I just need a couple of more votes. But this board is independent. So what is what are Georgia state officials doing in terms of like this board, and what is the board specifically doing?
So Georgia, that's true. The Republicans in Georgia did stand up to Trump, but Georgia is still the only major swing state in which Republicans control all levels of government. So
that's why this is happening. It's not so much that Georgia's strategic as much as this is the place we can do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Georgia was the only place where they could take over the election board in this kind of way. So what happened was they purged the Republicans that stood up to Trump from the election board. Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, who resisted Trump's demand to find 11,780 votes to reverse Biden's victory, he was kicked off the election board by Republicans. They changed the composition of the board. They gave the legislature and the Georgia Republican Party the power to appoint a majority of the board. They appointed election deniers to that board. Trump famously campaigned in Georgia and Atlanta and praised these election board members who no one had ever heard of before then as pit bulls fighting for, I think he said, honesty, transparency, and victory. And then the board started passing all of these rule changes. And what the board can do is they can give guidance to counties in terms of what the law says. So they said that counties must undertake what it called a reasonable inquiry before certifying the election without specifying what a reasonable inquiry meant. They said that counties were entitled to all election-related documentation, which is a very broad list of documents. They most recently said that they need to hand count ballots on election day. All of this could be used as a pretext for Republican county officials not to certify an election if a Democrat wins.
My understanding too, I mean, on top of all this, the hand count, like the Well, like, what is the sort of subtextual strategy here? Because there seems to be like an idea, and I think always about the Republicans in Pennsylvania who said, like, you can't count early ballots until the end of the election on election day, which makes no sense unless the idea is we want these elections to sort of like we want the results to be delayed. Like, what is the value? What is the sort of strategic subtextual value to Republicans to delay the counting of the votes, essentially?
Well, so they can weaponize it to their favor, because as you mentioned, in 2020, all of the state legislatures had the power to authorize the counting of mail ballots in a quicker kind of way. They refused to do so. And then, of course, it took longer to count those ballots. And then Trump weaponized that delay. And that was the beginning of his let's overturn the election argument, was that these states flipped in some kind of way because it took longer to count mail ballots, and his lead disappeared, basically. And that was the beginning of his campaign to try to steal the election. So what's going to happen in Georgia?
And we should just say, like, the lead doesn't disappear. It's just that there's only a certain number of ballots that have been counted.
Well, exactly.
Like, there's no real lead once everybody's voted.
But the thing is everyone in the media explained this ahead of time, and everyone knew it was going to happen. And then when it happened, Trump pointed to it as Exhibit A for the conspiracy that Democrats were rigging votes in Atlanta or in Milwaukee or in Phoenix or wherever it took longer to count ballots. So what's going to happen in Georgia is, because they now have to hand count the ballots, and the interesting thing is they're not actually hand counting votes. They're just comparing basically the machine vote count to a hand vote count, but that's going to take longer. And so what's happened is the results in Georgia are going to take longer. If there's some kind of delay, Trump's going to try to weaponize it. Then if counties don't certify the election, that could lead to a longer delay. What's likely going to happen is that some counties are going to refuse to certify. They have to certify by the Monday after the election day, so basically 6 days after. There's going to be some period of time in which they don't certify, and then likely what's going to happen is Republican officials, like the Secretary of State, are going to take them to court. The courts are going to say they have to certify, because that's what happened in other states. But if that period of time when they don't certify, which could be a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, that's going to leave a tremendous amount of space for Trump to spread disinformation about the vote counting process if that happens.
And we should say, like, I mean, I know you remember the 2000 election. I mean, so much of, we think it's like the vote is what the vote is. But even in the Supreme Court ruling, Bush v. Gore, they were hyper conscious of the perception of who won. In fact, they ruled that it would be prejudicial to George Bush if it appeared that he hadn't won in some fashion, which of course he hadn't won yet. There was no winner to the election. But like, this concept is out there, and it makes a big difference in the way that elections go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the fact that, well, first the media called Florida for Bush, so it felt like, and then it shifted, but it felt like the whole time the presumption was that Bush had won the state, even though there was never a period of time in which all votes are counted. And that remains a common misperception in Florida. What the Supreme Court did is the U.S. Supreme Court stopped the Florida Supreme Court from ordering a full recount of ballots. So there was never a full recount of ballots that eventually, I think, would have showed Al Gore won the state of Florida, but it never got to that. And so that really is my concern here, is that everyone thinks that we won't relive 2020 again. And hopefully we don't relive 2020 again. But Trump was trying to overturn the votes in a number of states, at least 3 states he was trying to overturn the results in. And he had to overturn 45,000 votes after the votes were counted. What if it's only 1 state? What if the votes aren't fully counted because counties refuse to certify? That's a different kind of situation. Then it might become more like Bush v. Gore in 2000 than Trump trying to throw out tens of thousands or potentially millions of votes in 2020.
And I know everybody's contemplating, like, what is this going to do to the Majority Report live show election coverage? But we should say, is secondary. If we leave there and we don't have a winner, that's just the case. I mean, we have to deal with it. But is there a room, or are there people, I should say, who are sitting around? Maybe they're getting in contact with Steve Bannon, sitting in a prison somewhere. But are they saying, like, okay, we have the ability to stall in Georgia. We've got some things going on in North Carolina. We might be able to mess with Wisconsin. We'll talk about these specifically. And so here's the plan. We're going to try and get one of these states to drag it out for a week, and then we're going to do X, Y, Z. Like they've got a plan, right? I mean, it may or may not, it may be sort of bananas, or maybe not, but they've got a plan, right? I mean, this isn't willy-nilly.
Exactly. And I think Georgia is the most concrete evidence we've seen yet of that plan, because what you have in Georgia is you have the national Trump officials, the people who tried to subvert the 2020 election, working with the state officials. So you see people who were, for example, Trump's lawyers in 2020, Cleta Mitchell, the Republican activist that was on the call with Brad Raffensperger, where Trump said that he wanted to reverse Biden's victory. I mean, she's been working with these local county board of elections. I mean, they're not getting this from nowhere. They're putting rule change after rule change after rule change through this board. And clearly someone is advising these county election officials, because the three members of the board themselves, they have no election related experience. They haven't worked on county election boards. They're people who came through basically the Stop the Steal movement in 2020. So they're getting their information from somewhere, and it's being fed by national conservative organizations, groups with ties to Project 2025, all of that. Georgia's not going to be the only state they focus on, but it's where they have the greatest amount of power. Now, they're certainly going to try to rerun that playbook in other swing states. The question is, are there other officials that could do something about it in the other swing states? For example, in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, there's Democratic majorities on the state Supreme Court there. So it would seem hard to pull it off there. There's Democratic secretaries of state or Democratic legislatures. Remember, in 2020, Trump tried to drag the leaders of the Michigan and Pennsylvania legislatures to the White House to overturn the results. Well, Democrats now control the Michigan legislature, and Pennsylvania is split. So in some ways, they have less of an ability to do this, but they're also a lot more organized and sophisticated, because in 2020, I'm sure you remember this, Sam, it was the Four Seasons Total Landscaping, Rudy Giuliani hair dye down the face type of election stealing. Now they control election boards in states like Georgia. So they can do this through more of the quote unquote normal channels, and they can set it up before the election, which they think will be more effective.
So in those states where they don't have the same amount of power they have in Georgia, where they control all levers of the government, we're talking about the Republicans, it seems like the sort of like second order strategy is to delay the vote counting. And we're seeing that we saw that in North Carolina, where they had to basically shorten the early voting period because RFK, and let's be clear here, RFK is not sitting there saying, okay, how can I slow the roll? Like, what's the strategy for me to slow the roll to help Donald Trump? Somebody is telling his campaign, this is what we're going to do. Republican lawyers are coming in and saying, here's where we're going to challenge this and that. So for instance, what's happening in Wisconsin with Kennedy?
Well, I mean, RFK has been trying to get his name off the ballot everywhere, and he's had mixed levels of success. But in North Carolina, what he did is he basically waited too long to try to get his name off the ballot, but then got bailed out by a very conservative court then, which said that—
to be fair, he had to go and see if Harris would respond to his requests for a job before he went to Trump to see if Trump would be interested. And after Harris wouldn't respond to him, you give a proper amount of time. Like, when are you going to respond to me? Hey, I'm really interested in this. It doesn't work out. Then he's got to go visit Trump and make the same deal there, because of course he is above all these type of petty politics, and it's not transactional at all.
So there was a lot
that's
of deal
why
making that
he didn't know that that's what his strategy was going to be at that point, because he hadn't been told by the Trump people yet what his strategy should be in terms of
and he may have also been preoccupied with sending text messages as well.
That
So
also sometimes when you have people,
was.
believe me, look, whether you're being victimized by someone paying you $5 million for what do you call it, for putting out videos, or you keep blocking people who keep sending you nude pictures, and then you unblock them because you think they're going to stop sending you nude pictures, and then you block them again. There are things where you can be victimized by this.
Yeah. So basically, because of this one guy, they had to reprint all the mail ballots in North Carolina to send out, which delayed mail voting. Now he's doing the same thing in Wisconsin. They're going to decide, the Wisconsin Supreme Court's going to decide whether his name appears on the ballot. This is a really, really big deal, though, whether he's on the ballot or not, because remember, in 2020, a lot of the third-party candidates were not on the ballot in places like Wisconsin. In 2016, they were. And there were a lot of factors over why Clinton won the election. But if you look at states like Wisconsin, the vote for Jill Stein was bigger than the margin of victory. And
why she lost that election.
Yeah, exactly. Why she lost that election. And again, I'm not saying that she lost because of the third party candidates, but it definitely played a role in terms of her losing. And it also helped Biden that they weren't on the ballot in places like Wisconsin in 2020. So Democrats sued to knock some of the third-party candidates off the ballot and succeeded in 2020. And so whether or not they're on the ballot, it's going to vary state by state, but that could have an impact in terms of not just RFK, but also Cornel West, Jill Stein, and others.
Right. And RFK in this instance appears to be taking more from Trump than he is from the Democrats. So in some ways, Trump has an RFK problem that is akin to the problem that Harris might have in terms of like Stein or West or something to that effect.
I mean, there still might be people who, even though RFK has dropped out, like RFK and don't like Trump. I mean, I'm not like predicting what Joe Rogan is going to do when he goes and votes, but you could imagine some people still voting as a protest vote for RFK if they see his name on the ballot, and being less likely to do so if he's not on there.
So where else? Georgia is a hot spot. Wisconsin, we're going to find out. North Carolina, at the very least, the early mail balloting was delayed by 3 weeks. Where is there another state that you are is on your map there that you're concerned about?
Well, I'm just concerned about the general level of election denialism writ large. I mean, if you look at all of these swing states, Republicans have taken over county election offices in all of these places. So even if the law hasn't changed, the composition of the election boards in different places has changed. And so I think we have to be prepared for them not to certify in some cases and to delay the vote count and try to look being weaponized. There also remains more litigation that could come before the Supreme Court. So there was a case in Mississippi yesterday challenging how Mississippi counts ballots, mail ballots that are postmarked by Election Day but counted after. That's only in Mississippi, but it drew a terrible panel of judges on the Fifth Circuit, which is the most conservative court in the country. And if they rule against Mississippi, which is amazing that they're going to rule against a voting law in one of the most restrictive states for voting in the country. But in any case, if the Fifth Circuit says that these ballots can't be counted if they arrive after Election Day, even if they're postmarked before Election Day, this was a big dispute in 2020, then that could go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could say that that applies nationally, which would change, I think, something like 17 states. Not all Democratic states, by the way. There's also places like Ohio and North Dakota that would fall into this category. But that could really disrupt voting laws writ large as well. So there's still a lot of litigation that's before the courts, even though basically voting has started in a number of states and will really ramp up in the next few weeks.
So what, from your perspective, like what can we do? Is it just like awareness, like make people aware of the fact that, there's going to be a delay in terms of results, and therefore, don't let the conspiracies fill that vacuum in terms of explanation, or what? What do we do?
Well, I mean, I think people should be volunteering to work the elections, to be poll workers, to be poll watchers, to make sure that voters have a smooth experience writ large. And then I think people should be going to these local election meetings, contacting these local officials, contacting the statewide officials, and making sure that people follow the law. This isn't about saying you should vote for one party or another. This is that you should follow the law. In every single state, including Georgia, certification is mandatory. Certification is not optional. So if Republicans refuse to certify the election, they won't just be exercising their own discretion. They will quite literally be breaking the law. And so that should be the message going forward, is we want the law to be followed, no matter who wins the election. And I think one of the things that has been disturbing over the last few years is that if you look at a lot of these meetings, if you look at a lot of the people who are being recruited, they're the election denier types. And I've always been wondering, like, where's the other side of this? Do Democrats just have a bunch of good lawyers, but no actual boots on the ground? So to me, a lot of people stepped up and worked the polls in 2020. And there was a lot of really good voter education in terms of how to be able to vote. And I think that was one reason that we had the highest turnout in 120 years. It wasn't just the candidates, that so much information went out about the importance of voting and how to do so. That you haven't heard as much about that now. And also the energy in terms of the election process is on the right, because they're the ones that believe the election is stolen, whereas the other side basically believes the system has worked and will work again, despite the fact that there's some major vulnerabilities in our system, not to even bring up all the undemocratic ways that we still run elections in this country. Namely, number one, that we're talking about an election that's going to be decided by 6 or 7 states as opposed to all 50 states. And once again, we're looking at a situation where a candidate could win the Electoral College and lose the popular vote, which I just never can remind anyone too much how ridiculous that system really is.
It's really ridiculous. And the other thing that really concerns me is that the ultimate arbiter of this could end up being the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And I always considered 2000 to have been a bag job. And this is this 6-3 court. I think their reluctance is in negative territory in terms of getting involved.
I have a lot less faith in them after the immunity decision. It's clear that in 2020 there was no support for throwing out 10 million votes, which is what the Trump campaign asked them to do. They told them to throw out 10 million votes in 5 states for Biden.
All undocumented.
That was too much.
Aliens. Right.
But after the immunity decision, you really have to wonder how far they're willing to go if they basically say the president is a king. And again, I think if it's that
and John
kind of
Roberts
thing,
was sort of instrumental in that.
The so-called moderate on the court. So if you're saying, okay, are they going to throw out tens of millions of votes? No. But if it's a Bush v. Gore situation, if it's maybe there's the legitimate, I want to put it legitimate in quotes, but there's a dispute over ballots that it goes beyond just refusing to certify the election. There's some kind of dispute over it. And it's one state and it's a few thousand votes. Then I think we have to be a lot less certain that the courts are going to do this. Also, there's 230 other judges that Trump appointed to the federal courts. They could also screw this process up along the way too. You could get a crazy opinion by a lower court judge. You could get a crazy opinion by a appeals court judge. In 2020, also, the Wisconsin Supreme Court voted 4-3 not to overturn the election results there. So they were 1 vote short. That court has shifted, but you could imagine potentially another state Supreme Court. Maybe it's Arizona, maybe it's Georgia, maybe it's somewhere else that does something unexpectedly and democratic norms hold. So if this thing goes to the courts, it makes me nervous. I don't think we can necessarily think that because it didn't happen in 2020, it won't happen again.
And I think the other thing, and I want to get your take on this lastly, haven't we had now multiple instances of the court saying in one instance, like, for instance, I think it was in Alabama, we're 9 months out from the election. We can't change anything right now because that we're just too close to an election, which, okay, all right. I mean, even though we're talking about something that like is sort of cuts to the heart of the Voting Rights Act, but then they turn around and, well, if we're 60 days out, there's plenty of time. I mean, am I making that up?
No, I mean, there was
dynamic?
there was a whole series of decisions by the Supreme Court that said that you couldn't change election laws too close to an election. Now, what this did in practice was it always blocked courts from striking down bad election laws. Then they get a case from Arizona saying that we need to reinstall proof of citizenship for voter registration. And the Supreme Court greenlit it right before mail voting started in the state, violating their own kind of laws. So it feels like there's a double standard here. You can't change voting laws if it's going to help people vote before the election, but you can change voting laws if you can hurt people's ability to vote. And it just goes to show you that there's no real principle behind any of this. So much of it is motivated by what's going to benefit Republicans and conservatives. And I think that's been very clear for a while now, that is the purpose of the 6-3 supermajority, that over and over they're going to weigh in on the side of trying to boost the interests of the Republican Party and the conservative movement, except in the sense where it's just so extreme, like with overturning the election, that they can't get involved. But whenever they can get involved within the normal bounds of the democratic process, they will.
Ari Berman, national voting rights correspondent for Mother Jones, author of Minority Rule, The Right-Wing Attack on the Will of the People and the Fight to Resist It. Thanks so much for your time today. We'll, of course, link to your 3 books, but maybe shadow ban one of them. And you're writing at Mother Jones. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Sam. Great to talk to you. See you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will have some fun. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, you also get the fun half, and you can IM us via our app. The app is at Majority App. If you're a member, everybody can use the app. It's completely free. But if you're a member, you get to IM us via the app. Also, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We had a level 4 hype train going on Twitch earlier, if I'm not mistaken. So I just want to say poggers to those folks. If you're watching us on Twitch, you may or may not know, and even if you're not watching us on Twitch, but you're a Prime member, you can go and dedicate each month. You got to redo it every month, but dedicate your Prime subscription to us on Twitch. And we get, like, I don't know, some small payment, but they add up for sure.
I'd like to shout out Look It's Hunter 3 minutes ago resubscribed for their 17th month.
Nice.
18th month, actually.
Nice. So if you're a Prime member, whether you use Twitch or not, you can get Twitch. And every month you just sign up. You basically point your Prime subscription. There's an automatic subsidy for whatever show you choose. Choose us. Level business 4 hype poggers.
Serious business, 43 months. Goodness, that's a long time.
That is a long time. That used a lot of effort. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, hot chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. You can get Majority Report blend, but they have a bunch of other blends. They have a bunch of other single origin. Great coffee. You can get it ground or you can get it whole bean. Now we will see you in the fun half.
Well, I'm going to promote my stuff first.
Apologies. Wait, what's happened? What happened on ESPN? Do we know?
I imagine they talked about football, if I had to guess.
Football on ESPN. Check it out.
Beyond that, Emma probably talked about Aaron Rodgers or something. We got another hype train going. Thanks to everybody, Punch Drunk Pulpit, all those guys. Last night on Left Reckoning, Derek Davis sat on to talk about the new craze in foreign policy, which is de-escalation through escalation. Check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomiki.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false. No, I'm sorry. Women's.
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports.
We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians. They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him!
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35. 501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this.